Two more Stasi left the apartment next. The smaller of them pushed past me to clear the way for his companion, who was carrying an armful of books, papers, and what appeared to be rubber stamps. It was a child's play set. I used to have one of those like it, in fact, so I couldn't think of any reason Herr Kraus should have it, or why the Stasi would be interested if he did, unless it wasn't being used for play. A gust of wind came from the open apartment and blew into the hallway. It caught a few papers from the officer's hands and scattered them on the ground. Without thinking, I reached down to help pick them up. Sure enough, the printer on them was stamped with a message that looked as if it had been carved into the stamps. If I cannot speak what I think, then it's a crime just to be me. Despite its promise of a free press, the state controlled all printing machines and wrote the stories for newspapers to publish. No citizen was allowed to write his own ideas if they differed from the state message, and certainly it was against the law to distribute those writings. But that's exactly what Herr Kraus had done. He had carved a political message into children's toy stamps, and in so doing had risked years of imprisonment. From what I knew of from what I knew of a Stasi prison, there would be no public trial. He would have no opportunity to defend himself. His interrogators would stop at nothing before he signed a confession for whatever crimes they decided he had committed. In effect, Herr Kraus's life was already over. Give me that paper, the shorter officer ordered me. Something about him seemed familiar, though I couldn't quite place it. Let her read it, Herr Kraus shouted from the end of the hallway. Why is the government so afraid of letting its people think? But the officer shoved me against the wall, and in the moment when our eyes met, I whispered, I know you. He was a friend of Fritz's who used to be years ago. When I was very young, he used to ride me around on the back like a pony. Didn't he remember that? Didn't he know me too? He reached for the paper, but for some reason I clutched it to my chest. He raised a hand and slapped me hard across the cheek. I gasped as it knocked the breath from me too. Then someone shouted, That's my sister! Please stop! Suddenly Fritz was at my side. He apologized to the officers, then grabbed the paper from my hand. When Fritz went to give it to the officer holding me, his eyes widened. Victor? That was his name. I remember it now. Victor clearly recognized my brother too, but in an instant his expression hardened again and his grip on my shoulder tightened. Fritz reached out a hand to me, but Victor wasn't loosening his hold. I shuddered inside. Was I going to be arrested too? Fritz's voice remained calm. Victor, let her go, for the sake of our friendship. Finish with the girl and come, Victor's companion called. After a final squeeze on my shoulder, he shoved me toward Fritz and said, The Stasi have no friends. You'll be joining us soon. You'll find out. Once they left, Fritz hauled me into our apartment and locked the door behind us. What were you thinking? He yelled. I heard Herr Kraus calling for help. Printing a paper can't be such a bad crime, is it? It's not up to us to determine the crimes or to help him. Fritz slumped onto the couch, closed his eyes, and massaged his temples as if a sudden headache had come on. In a quieter voice, he said, Victor and I used to be friends. He was a good guy once. I sat beside Fritz, feeling as exhausted as he looked. Is that what'll happen to you after you go to the military? Fritz only sat up and stared blankly back at me. Yes, I think that's exactly what will happen. Chapter 12. Fritz and I agreed we shouldn't tell Mama about her Kraus arrest and the trouble I nearly got into there. She seemed happier lately, and neither of us wanted to ruin it for her. We're in a routine again, Mama often said at dinner. That's good. But the routine was starting to wear on me, and something about reading the stamped message from Herr Kraus made me want to see my father again. It seemed like something Papa would have said if he was here. The next morning, I looked for him as I approached the crowded platform. It was a Saturday. Only a half of us only half a day of school for us, but the least favorite day to walk there because of the Western tourist who often came to the wall on the weekends. They took pictures and brought their binoculars and stared into our worlds as if we neither needed or wanted their pity. I hated that they watched us helplessly, but did nothing for us. Then I stopped, as if I had seen myself in a mirror for the first time. Who was I to complain about them? Wasn't I guilty of the same thing, of staring helplessly, doing nothing about my own problems? The tourists couldn't do anything for me. Not even the powerful governments of the West could break through what they called the Iron Curtain. And everyone inside East Germany was any sort of influence, stood shoulder to shoulder with Russia. No, there was only one person who could change my situation: me. A couple of Grinzers were patrolling the wall this morning, but I didn't have their attention yet. Nor did I care. I knew down to my toes that my father would be on the platform, and I wanted to see him. I didn't at first, but then I kept walking forward. Dominic pushed to the front of the crowd and pointed to me. He gave a whoop I thought I could hear from where I stood, and then called down. Almost instantly my father was on the platform too. He started into his dance with the digging, but the platform was too crowded. And he didn't need to do it. I understood what he wanted, just not where. So I counted out 3 long and deliberate paces. Then, with only a peek his way, I knelt down on the ground and drew a small X. X marks the spot.